we got to start with Carlos Correa because one of the craziest off seasons of all time for a player, and it's revolving around Carlos Correa, who signed for 13 years, $350 million with the Giants over a month ago. A week after that, after a bad physical, signs with the Mets for 12 years, $315 million. Guess what? Another bad physical. The Mets didn't like the physical, but it looked like he was still going to sign there. Back and forth they went, talking and entering clauses into the contract, but it seemed like they were going to figure it out. And then today, late last night, you hear from Ken Rosenthal and a few others that things are moving hot and heavy with the Minnesota Twins at the last second. And then today, we wake up and Carlos Correa, 6 years, $200 million guaranteed. There is a lot to this, which I will talk all about in a second. But Alex, this is one of the craziest roller coasters. I don't even want to say in just baseball, like in all of sports. It's just crazy that one of the top players, this is happening to him. And it looks like, pending a physical, this Minnesota will be his final landing spot.
So I kind of touched on this last week. This whole saga feels like a good old episode of The Bachelor for Carlos Correa, and no one was accepting his rose. Not the Giants, not the Mets, but you know who always comes back? The loyal ex, who likes to ignore all of the red flags, a.k.a. a questionable physical, and they're willing to take you back. They're willing to kind of ignore those things.
Yeah.
And you know, for Carlos Correa, wasn't his first choice, obviously, wasn't his second choice, obviously, but it's a comfortable landing spot. He knows he's going to be appreciated there. He's definitely getting paid. He's getting more per year, obviously not as many years, but he's getting close to $33.3 million a year, opposed to where he was going to get around 26 with the other deals. So it's kind of like, well, you got to take what you can get at this point.
Yeah. So bear with me here. The very interesting part of all of this comes in the details, in the semantics, in the clauses, in the what were the Mets offering? Why did he sign with the Twins? So let me break down everything for you because it is wild. And I mentioned off the top the Giants deal, the Mets deal, and now this. But why the Twins? Why not the Mets? And why would he take the 6 years, $200 million? There's a lot that went into this, but Bob Nightingale, friend of the pod, Bob Nightingale, I like to call him, was all over it with the details of the contract. He tweeted this: signing bonus of $8 million. In 2023, $36 million. 24, 25, it's $36 million. And then from there, it ticks down every year. But the first 6 years are guaranteed $200 million. Whereas the Mets, they had an offer that essentially, if he had maxed it out and accomplished all of the options vested, it would have eventually been the 12 years, $315 million that we originally saw, but by no means fully guaranteed. The Mets' fully guaranteed offer was 6 years, $157.5 million, meaning $42.5 million more Carlos Correa will be making guaranteed by signing in Minnesota. Add on top of that taxes, by the way, 6 years, taxes in New York, while making $42.5 million less, it's going to end up closer to $75 million more he's making by signing in Minnesota. Now, the nitty-gritty details gets really, really interesting. Bear with me here. Once the 6 years are up in Minnesota, he does have a 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th year option, but he has to accomplish certain things along the way. The most easily accomplishable will be staying on the field, getting a certain number of at-bats. That first year, year 7, you'd have to have 575 plate appearances for his option to kick in. Okay? After that, that number of at-bats goes down. But he can also kick that next year's option in by winning a Silver Slugger Award in the year, finishing in top 5 in the MVP race, or winning ALCS or World Series MVP. If he does any of those, it also kicks in. Now, on the Mets side, things weren't that easy. There were a lot more things involved. There was an annual physical involved, which I know Boris and Correa did not want to do. So it really did get interesting, but the Twins have said they are okay with the ankle injury that everybody has had this big issue over. So, man, a lot going on here, but the 6 years guaranteed and more money is why he's back in Minnesota. And obviously those options kick in if he stays on the field. But, man, craziness.
I mean, I think I sent a text at like 7 a.m. this morning. Like, are we going to dive? Is before the news came out. Are we going to dive into this Carlos Correa possible move back to the Twins? And then what? An hour later, it all came out. We're like, oh yeah, no. We got to dive into this. I mean, there's a lot of mixed feelings around this because obviously, Twins was not his first choice. He opted out of that contract initially, wanted to go to Giants, wanted to go to Mets, wasn't wanted in those places.
In fact, we were told when Boris told him that he was signing with the Mets, he tackled him on the bed out of excitement in the room they were in, and that's how pumped up he was.
So you got to put that into perspective too. He was extremely excited to go to these other teams, and he kind of just had to go with what was available here. And so are you going to get that same enthusiasm? I mean, you will, obviously. He's a great player. He's going to be their top player. He's making a ton of money. He's got to stay healthy if he wants to continue to make that kind of money. But there's just a different energy when you're going back to like, oh, I wanted to go somewhere else, but I guess I'm coming back here too. Just thinking the whole like psychology of it all too. Like that's the point that I'm going to be watching out for with Correa this year.
Well, the interesting thing so both of these teams were willing to offer 6 years guaranteed money, the Twins obviously being a lot higher. What I find interesting is the stipulation of the number of plate appearances he has to reach, which starts with year 7 at 575 plate appearances. In Carlos Correa's 8 years, he's only reached the 502 number 3 times. So that number is high. And to me, it almost says like, this is a 6-year deal.
Yeah.
And like, you're probably not going to hit 575 in that next year.
Yeah.
And then the numbers go way down. Like in in year 7 of this contract, if it vests, he'd make $25 million. Year 8, $20 million. Year 9, $15 million. Year 10, $10 million.
Yeah.
And there's no opt-outs for him.
Yeah.
So it's like if you make it to year 10 and you're still playing and you're still a stud, you're making $10 million. It almost feels like they know he's not going to make it through all of those vesting options. There's just, I think the numbers speak for itself. It's just not going to happen. So were Carlos Correa not to reach 575 at bats in 2029, it wouldn't mean he just becomes a free agent. The Twins have a $25 million club option. He could earn $20 million in 2030, $15 million in 2031, and $10 million in 2032. But it just feels like, look, this is a 6-year deal, and everybody knows it. And that's why, if you look at this deal as a whole, this is why Carlos Correa is signing with the Minnesota Twins. He's making a ton more money over this 6-year deal.
Yep.
And I think he knows his body's not going to hold up well for over half of a decade. These physicals weren't working out for a reason.
Yeah.
So to all Mets fans, what I would say to you today, and I know it's frustrating, and I know the Mets kind of needed that one more bat, and he was the perfect fit. But if it came at a price of 12 years and $315 million, I don't think you'll want that to happen, because I don't think Carlos Correa is even thinking he holds up for 12 years, which is why he took this deal for 6 years and $200 million with all of those crazy stipulations after. The injury showed up on the physical for 2 different teams for a reason.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to pay him for over a decade. And I think everybody knows that he's probably not going to hold up for very long. So if I'm a fan of the Mets, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, but in the grand scheme, in the long run, I totally understand Steve Cohen, who's not just spending aimlessly, might I add. Yes, spending a lot of money, but it's been smart in places.
Yeah, smart investment.
He put his foot down and said, I'm not going to invest $315 million into somebody for 12 years that has this bad of a physical and without putting clauses in that say, hey, you'd need to take an annual physical.
Yeah.
You'd need to reach this. You'd need to reach this for this to kick in. Totally makes sense. Now he's off the books. The payroll is back under $300 million, and it frees up a lot of space for Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. Okay. Always got to bring in Shohei Ohtani. But now I got to think, because Carlos Correa got basically a window, a deadline put on his career, more so than most players, because teams were willing to give him 12, 13 years until they saw the physical.
Yeah.
So it's like, no. You are only going to be valuable for half of that. And the Twins obviously gave him what they thought he was valued for that. But you got to think of the mental mind game now that plays with him. Like, okay, like the top of the top, the doctors, the teams know that I am going to be only at my peak for 6 more years. The physical shows that. So you got to I think it's got to be so interesting as an athlete to know. Everyone knows it's a short career, but when you have it kind of cut in half and told like we know you're only going to be great for half of that now.
And this was always the deal I feel like we were going to get to. It's the one that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then for Carlos's perspective, look, I know I'm probably not going to play into my mid to late 30s.
Yeah.
I need to take as much money as I possibly can over the 6 years I'm being offered. And that's what happened. And if you just look at this in a nutshell and why, the Mets were willing to offer something similar, but why the Twins to go back and play for a team that will be competitive, but as we speak right now, not as good as the Mets. Look, the Mets were also willing to fully guarantee 6 years, but that was coming at a price of $157.5 million, and they proposed new conditions Correa's camp saw as more difficult to reach, involving not just plate appearances, but time in the field.
Yeah.
So the Mets stipulations were a lot more than the Twins. The Mets' newly reconfigured deal might still have called for a potential of $315 over 12 years, but the Twins deal had a lot less stipulations. So he's making a lot more money in Minnesota for the first 6 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's all there is to it.
Nope. Congrats.
Congratulations to Carlos Correa.
Congrats. You got a lot of money.
And congratulations to Twins fans, because you got him for less years than everybody else, which I think will end up being just fine. You have him for 6 years. And, man, do you have a stud.
Yeah.
He is a stud. Get into the playoffs. He turns that new level. He's a leader. He plays great defense. So congratulations to Carlos Correa and to Twins fans. Thanks for watching. If you love Flippin Bats, swinging 3-0, or just talking ball, join us. Call us at 213-537-9339 with your questions. We have a weekly guest, and we have a lot of fun, so hit that subscribe button.